Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to www.theriotradio.com. This is Symposium, and for the next hour we'll be having our final discussion on the existence of God. I'm your host, Keegan Gwydolin. For the year.
I'm your host, Roman Chodan, and that's for the year, because we'll obviously be continuing this maybe even into the summer if you guys want to listen. So today's topic is Existence of God, Part 2, and we have a lot of guests, as always. If you guys would like to introduce yourselves.
Hey, I'm Mackie Drew. I'm new. Cut me some slack.
Hi, I'm Brad. Guest number 2.
I'm John. Peace.
I'm Rod. I could handle some slack as well.
I'm Kevin, and I don't have anything to say about that.
Right. I'm Tony. I'm not Canadian.
I'm Conan.
That's it.
And he's Conan. All right. So, before we start, Mackie Drew has been doing some homework, and he's got a nice little flowchart of discussion rules, I guess. So we're just going to pass this around, and from now on, we're going to try and stick to this because it keeps the arguments valid. So just take a look at that, everyone. And in the meantime, I think Mackie wants to start it off, right? You got a question? You want to ask everyone?
I think that I would like to ask, why Christianity?
That's a good question.
Anyone? Anyone at all?
Go for it. I'll jump in here. Why Christianity? Because it's the only religion that where you don't have to do something to get right with God. In fact, God has to do something for us, and that's huge. The fact that that I can't do anything to get right with God, as opposed to I have to pray 5 times a day or I have to do all these kinds of things. It's that God has done something for me through Jesus Christ. He came and helped me when I needed desperate help.
If I could just maybe add something to that. Additionally, obviously we don't have all the time in the world to study every world faith, every world religion that's ever existed since the beginning of time. But one thing that sets Christianity apart is the person of Jesus Christ himself. When you do even take sort of a cursory glance at world religion, religious figures tended to point to something else. They had the way to connect with the ultimate, and they could show that way to you. And if you were to follow the way that they took, then you could connect with the transcendent or the ultimate. Where Jesus didn't point to anyone, he in fact said, I am the way, I am the truth, and the life. Jesus claimed to be God himself. So, I think a good place to start then would be at the person of Jesus Christ and see, like, does this man live up to his claims? If he claims to be God, and he claims to be able to, as John said, like, put us in proper standing with himself for all time through the work that he does for us, then I think that's what sets Christianity apart in that sense as well.
So it seems to me that... Oh, Tony would like to say? You can go ahead
just
first.
one thing that's slightly different. Okay, I hope you guys remember all this. But for me, it's not a question of why Christianity. It's the question of, what is truth. So when I look at, say, math, everyone knows math. I don't look at 1 plus 1. I was like, why 2? Why not 3? Why not any other number? Well, I look at it as in what is 1 plus 1? It's 2. So it's not the matter of why it's actually that number. Like, why not any other number? It's just what happens to be true. So for me, it's not why Christianity. For me, I have been seeking truth since I was a kid, and I guess I found that in high school. And this is what's true to me, both rationally and emotionally. So.
Well, I don't think that something can be true to one person rather than true to another, for one. And First off, the Enuma Elish, which I've mentioned a few times in the past, the Babylonian creation story. You don't have to do anything to get with the gods. It's a pagan religion. You are by default brought to brought to the afterlife and brought to the gods when you die. It's one of the gods of the Enuma Elish was Yahweh, the god of the armies, which is roughly translated into Yahweh Sabaoth. So I think that, and another point, that Muhammad claims to have a direct line to God, as well as Jesus.
Well, we're not saying a direct line here. Like Jesus, we're not saying a direct line to God. We're saying Jesus said he is God.
Well, let me ask, why do you believe him?
For me, on the basis of the resurrection.
No, well, why do you believe all of the tenets of Christianity? No articles other like Paul was the first one to write any scripture on Christianity 70 years. He wasn't born when there's none of the historians, none of the astrologers from the time noticed the star of the east that led the three wise men to Jesus. None of them noticed that. They watched the stars every night, and none of the notable, any of the astrologers and astronomers from the time mentioned that. None of them mentioned the earth shaking. None of them mentioned anything about Jesus or the rumors of Jesus until 70 years when Paul mentioned Jesus, and not in any divine nature. He mentioned him in the basic story, and until every 5 or 10 years after that, they came out with a new gospel, and those only came out after Paul started teaching them of Jesus. It just got more and more inflated from Mark.
What do you mean by that? Every 10 years they come out with a new gospel?
It was Paul first, and then it was Mark, I believe. I don't remember the exact order. Sorry,
Paul didn't write a gospel.
Sorry, I don't know the name. He wrote a book.
He wrote the letters. Right?
Yeah,
it was Sorry, I'm not. I'm
no,
faint on I'm faint on the terminology. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not. Yeah. I was not raised Christian.
You asked for slack, and we'll give it to you.
Yeah. But you got to give us some too.
So, well, I guess what's the question? You started off talking about ancient Mesopotamian gods and Mesopotamia is where the Babylonians.
No, I know, but there were a lot of. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Let's.
The point is if I'm understanding, if you're holding an atheist position, you're actually saying that there's an account for there is such a thing as gods. It might not be a Christian God, but there's gods.
Well, I find it's easiest to argue with at any point with any theist that you don't. An atheist isn't making any claims to anything. They're arguing that person's reality. They're coming into their reality and arguing on their terms. So I'm arguing on the basis that on the idea that what you're saying to you is true. Sorry, but
are you kind of asking what makes Jesus unique then? If we have these other ancient accounts,
yeah, I'm treating Christianity as mythology, just as any other mythology, and it doesn't Horus gave birth to Osiris, which is a half man, half god, and it follows he had the same number of disciples as Jesus many years beforehand. He was a god as he claimed to be as it does in Christianity. I don't see what there's any uniqueness to Christianity at all. It only borrows from Judaism, Babylon, and
how many people are there nowadays who believe in these Babylonian gods and believe in Horus and all this? I think we need to. People that come out. If someone was to come out tomorrow and say, "Well, okay, I believe in the flying purple spaghetti monster," then that probably wouldn't last very long as a cult. But I mean, you look at Christianity and you look at these disciples who he had, and every one of them except for one was killed for their faith. And here you have these people, and you look at these people and you say, there's got to be something behind that. This wouldn't have lasted 2,000 years if it was just based on a lie someone had made up or something like that. There must be something behind this to allow it to last that long.
And can I just jump in? And I would say that thing would be passion. or emotional involvement.
But what if you had been that person with Jesus? If you had been with him and then he was killed and he didn't rise from the dead, how would you be willing to die for him?
Are you asserting that nobody has ever died for the sake of religion?
No, I'm not. Here, go
What
ahead.
about all the false religions that you're claiming are false?
I think we're talking about something entirely different here. Yeah, you're completely right. People die for their religion all the time. But what happens in those cases is they're dying for, let's say I'm willing to sacrifice myself because in heaven I'm going to be greatly rewarded for my sacrifice to this God. What we're talking about in Christianity is these men were claiming, I saw this man die on a cross, get put into a tomb, and then 3 days later appear to me, and I'm willing to die for that. That's entirely different. We're not talking about the same thing here, right? If your life is threatened, if I say to you, did you or did you not see this occur, and you're willing to die for, there's reason for me to believe, well, maybe there's something actually going on here. So the early Christian church claimed that they actually saw this man risen from the... They weren't dying in hopes that maybe this Jesus will bless me once I get to heaven. So do you see the difference there?
I see what you're saying, but I'd like to note that there is there's no archaeological evidence other than what's in the Bible for any of the apostles even existing. There's no way you're begging the question and saying that they existed. They very well may not have existed. But one more note: the fact that that many people believe this lie. Sorry about certainty there. Sorry about that. And then that's an appeal to popular opinion. It's a logical fallacy, and it just doesn't hold up as an argument. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
Two things that you said. One, let's go back to mythology. One of the distinct differences, and Roman and Keegan have at least acknowledged that Jesus Christ did exist as an historical person. But you're using analogies of myths. The movie Thor is coming out. I haven't seen the movie, but that's not a plug to go see the movie. But I'm saying it's a myth. Thor did not exist as a human, whereas Jesus did. Second of all, I just want to correct, there are archaeological evidence of the apostles. You can go to Turkey today. You can go to the place where the Apostle John was buried.
I know 3 places in Turkey where they found all 3 of Noah's Arks.
But I'm telling you, they don't know. They haven't. In fact, if you try to find where Noah's Ark is, there's very limited access because it's in a military zone. For at least where they think Mount Ararat was. In this case, it has down through the centuries has been corroborated that this is the place and burial of the Apostle John. And you can question that. You can say, well, was it really? We don't know. Well, how do we know where any historical figure was really born?
Sorry,
buried?
I kind of want to just cut this off here.
Yeah.
Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to discuss the existence of God, not the existence
off topic.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It gets like this.
But I do think this does relate, though.
It does kind of, but we want to get more to the logic and the reason behind it. I think what Mackie was trying to do was he was trying to say that there's very large amounts of parallels between the stories. The basic backbone of all these different types of mythology are there with the Jesus story, I would say, and even those that predate the Jesus story. And that's I think the point he was trying to get across. Okay, so let's get back to the actual God debate.
Yeah. So. I want to, like Mackie was sort of getting there, and I wanted to jump in and say, yes, perfect, but it got out of hand. Now, he's saying that as, I guess, agnostics or atheists or whatever you want to call us, we don't make claims on anything, right? We don't make claims on things that we can't logically justify or prove. So, and that's where I think most of us have a problem with belief in God, is that there's no evidence that exists that is, I would say, undeniable evidence of God. There's always a more like an additional explanation for whatever phenomenon you point to and say God did this. We can say, well, God could have done that. Like, we certainly acknowledge that as a possibility, but we also say, or it could be the product of this or this or this.
Yeah, there's no evidence that that can hold up to today's scrutiny of other types of events. It seems like Christianity and religions have a certain kind of like a safety shield from from like applying certain types of logic and applying our own types of inquiries, I would say, maybe.
Yeah, and I guess what I want to put to you is that exact argument is that the reason that we don't believe, the reason that we're having this debate is because we don't believe there is evidence to support this claim. Yeah, go ahead.
One thing two things I want to say first. It's you guys seem a lot more like agnostics than atheists. Atheists are usually people who say there are no God, whereas agnostics, from my understanding, are people who either say, "Oh, we can't know for sure," or you believe that you can't know for sure.
There is a gradient, though, I think.
Well, the actual definition of the agnostic is exactly what you said. You can be an agnostic theist and admit that that you believe in a God, but you can't prove that there is a God. And the agnosticism works both ways. The agnosticism is just the admittance that there is no evidence that you couldn't prove either way. It's not a gradient between theism and atheism. The atheism and theism is more, should we believe in God?
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that it is a gradient. All I'm saying is that you seem to be more agnostic than you are atheist, because atheists are actually trying to prove that this is, instead of saying we do not know.
A Gnostic atheist would have almost in my opinion, as ridiculous of a position as a theist. You can't prove it either way.
Okay.
As scientists, nothing is ever proven 100%, and that's why if there was a gradient between, this is kind of what Dawkins defines it as, from 1 to 7, I think 7 being believing that there is a God 100%.
No, other way
is it?
around.
Yeah, okay. So 1 believing that believing in God 100%, and 7 saying there is no God 100%. Most of us, and most atheists, will sit on a 6. No one sits on a 7.
Yeah, and like for me, I don't want to speak for anyone else here, but for me, I would put the existence of God on the same plane of possibility as the existence of unicorns or the Tooth Fairy or Santa Claus.
Just like to add that a unicorn only is just a horse with a horn. That's not that unlikely, but I have a question, a direct question that might get this conversation going a little. Can you, just so we have some bounds to this argument, could you at least come to a consensus of what God's duties were and what they are? Like, what does he do for the universe? What did he do for the universe?
Let's stay on this. Does he exist, and what?
Yes, I actually had something else. I just wanted to address that to make sure we know where each of us stand. But okay, so in terms of what you mentioned earlier, I think the Christianity having this like innate shield or whatever. I think it was Roman who said that prevents us from looking at it logically. But it's like a lot of things that happen in history. There's an innate shield, so to speak, to prevent us from actually proving 100% that it existed or that it happened logically. Like, take for example, I can say I had an epiphany at 2:30 a.m. last night. I can't really prove that to you because that epiphany was in my head, but that doesn't make it any less real. I'm not saying that we should go about just telling people you should believe just because I told you, but what I'm saying is that epiphany isn't any less real just because I myself can't prove it.
Yeah, but also what defined it, it's real to you, right? Someone's like at worship night, right? People there were experiencing real emotional stimulus. What they were experiencing was real, whether or not if the connection was with God or with the other people around them, the support of the community, all these various social factors is completely a different story, completely. And what you were saying with history, right? History is written by the victor. That's you know what I mean?
Yeah, but history is written with a very, all history that's written by the victor, you can see a common trend of leaving out defeats, leaving out things that were bad. Egyptians never wrote about Moses. You went to the archaeology.
I was there for a bit of it.
But okay, Mackie probably has a lot to say. But all these things about history and things in the Bible, they're one thing, like the Bible is very, very detailed in terms of what history it talked about, and even the stuff it didn't leave out, and even the people, the figures that were used in this historical book. Like, come on, like, okay, back in the day, like using a woman to be a spokesperson to say, oh, I saw Jesus rose from the dead, even including a woman in the lineage of Jesus. That's not something that Jews would do. And a lot of things that makes this a very weird historical document, but its weirdness makes it true, if that makes sense.
And if I just jump in here, one statement I think, Roman, you said about history belongs to the victor. Well, we need to remember, if we're going to talk particularly about Christianity, is where we started, is for the first 300 years, Christianity was not the victor.
I wasn't actually referring to that.
Okay.
It was just to his saying that overall history has...
The thing that, as we talk about this, and getting back to the point about does God exist, I think we came to the conclusion last week that we get to the place where we can't prove empirically that God exists, and we can't not prove that He exists.
Yeah.
And so now we're at this place of, okay, we're a 6 or we're a 7 to the Dawkins scale, and I think we're coming at it from this perspective. You are looking at it as seeing is believing. That's a scientific, observing, being able to duplicate, whereas we're saying believing leads to seeing. And the question that I would throw to all of us is, if that's the case, and if you are really on a pursuit of truth and pursuit of what truly is out there and what exists, and on a quest to find all things in knowledge, why would you not at least say, God, if you do exist, show yourself?
We have several times. And with believing is seeing, you're entering a psychological state where you want to see. I wasn't hit by a car. God, obviously, I was almost hit by a car, but just narrowly missed it. God turned the wheel of that person or whatever, made them hit the brake that much earlier or whatever. Therefore, God exists. And what I say is you can't. You're true. You're right. Sorry, you can't empirically prove or disprove God. But from my logic, I see a world that's very backed up scientifically, that doesn't have a necessity for God, and which to me is a very interesting point. And Rod, would you like to comment?
Well, Mackie's...
Yeah, sorry. I've got a couple things that I've added up here. Okay, first off, for you, I've never seen or heard of a Hindu saying that the Christian God spoke to him. He'll always say Vishnu or one of the other gods spoke to him.
I would disagree a lot. A lot of Hindus would actually accept Jesus Christ as a deity. My neighbor actually feels he can pray to Jesus Christ, and Jesus could provide him blessings that other gods couldn't. So it's quite possible that he could say to me, I heard from Jesus, maybe not in a voice we could hear, but so I don't think I think a Hindu is a poor example.
Well, what about the Hindus that hear Vishnu? But another point. Sorry.
No. Don't leave that. What are you getting at? What's the question?
I'm just saying that there wasn't a question there. Sorry, I was just a defensive point.
What he's saying is, it's believing is seeing. I pray to a God. The God I prayed to must have been talking to me. And with the Hindu thing where he prays to other gods, I don't know if that's really a good example, maybe, because if he believes in multiple gods, then that doesn't follow Christianity.
But couldn't there be multiple spiritual beings?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. That's part of the biblical worldview. Is not only does God exist, and you're right, He is an amaterial being, but He also created numerous other spiritual beings. So I myself have no problem when someone says they had a spiritual experience, and no way does it line up with how I might understand a spiritual experience, because I actually do believe that there are other spirits out there. And now I admit, that's a huge mystery to me, and I don't purport to understand it at all. But yeah, that isn't beyond reasonable to me.
So you believe that there are other quote-unquote gods. Not to say that you would worship these gods or whatever, but
The Bible intimates that there are other gods. There are other gods.
So does that sit well with all the Christians in the room, that there are other quote-unquote gods? Not that you should worship them necessarily, but...
I actually have a big question, too. So, okay, so, I don't know... Okay, yeah.
I want to hear the answer. I want to hear the answer.
My question
Does that sit well with everyone here?
I think in the Bible there are times where God will make reference to gods with a small g.
Yeah. Right.
As in he is God.
Right.
And he is creator, he is God. But there are, he created spiritual forces of evil, that we would label as demons, whatever you want to call it. We would label them as demons. And they have power. They have spiritual power. But maybe they are called gods, small g, but they are not God. They are not a God. They are not in control. They are not sovereign. They are just something with spiritual power.
So then,
if I could just add something really quickly to that, like a central theme to the Bible is other creatures attempt to usurp God's position as God. Like that's central to the biblical message.
Okay. Now, so does it... I totally lost my train of thought.
My question was, so God created these other gods, and what was the name of the Hindu god?
I wouldn't call them other gods.
Okay,
God
other
created
beings,
other
right?
beings.
Yeah, He created them.
But it just confuses people.
He created them, but now He's jealous that you would worship them. So He makes them. What He does is He puts them under this. This guise that they are also all-knowing, omnipotent, and then they create another religion, and so people worship them based on their geographical position.
I think
right?
Okay, so if there is God and there's a lot of other supernatural beings, could they all be friends?
Okay, I think you're misunderstanding what we're saying. What we're not saying is that God created Vishnu and God created Allah, and we're not saying that. What we're saying is that God is God. God is sovereign. God is the only God.
Right.
And then God has created angels. Some of these angels fell, became demons. Now these demons can take... what we're saying is that someone can be misguided, and this is, of course, this is a very exclusive point of view because we do believe that we have the truth.
But that's not consistent with what Rod said, though, right?
No. What Rod is saying is that
there are supernatural.
Yeah, and that someone could be led to believe that, maybe they pray to this God, whoever this God is, and then if they hear a response, okay, maybe they believe that it's that God. It could be a demon who is acting, speaking to them. We're not saying that all these gods exist because the core central, our belief is that there is one sovereign God, and that these other gods are just, maybe they're a demon speaking to someone.
Which answers that question back to the Babylonians' god, the Egyptians' gods, that if there's this counterfeit spiritual beings, okay, logically, if there's these counterfeit spiritual beings, of course they're going to have counterfeit stories that twist the truth.
So now, we started off debating the existence of one supernatural being, and now we're debating the existence of one ultimate supernatural being with a whole host of minions versus, pseudo minions, evil minions, evil twin. Now you're just stacking on more supernatural beings, which I think is making your argument weaker.
And I just comment on what John said. The problem with they're stolen. These stories are stolen, but Odin, the story of Odin and Horus. I don't know as much about Horus, but they predate the story of Jesus. They came before the story of Jesus. How could they steal something in which they came before?
It's way back in the conversation.
No, that's what John said.
But if this is true of ultimate reality, and these spiritual beings know ultimate reality, they existed perhaps before the cosmos even came about, then they could know and attempt to create alternative counterfeit stories, right? So
I see what you're saying.
There was the plan of God was revealed from the beginning of this universe and the creation of this world. You know what? The funny part about all this that I'm very interested in is you've brought up other gods. You've asked questions about other gods, and it's almost like you're saying that there is this existence of these other spiritual beings, and that
we're just suggesting what if.
Okay.
We don't exactly believe. Well, I don't believe.
I mean, I love the discussion. I'm just saying, logically, you should be
What
coming
I'm-
at. Well,
what I'm
here's
more
why he
saying-
does not believe. This is
No,
why he
what
does
we're-
not exist.
What we're saying is, like, we both agree that Odin or Thor doesn't exist as a deity, correct? Is that fair to say? Yes? I'm saying, and I think we're all saying, what makes Odin or Thor any different from Yahweh or Jesus?
For me, a big one is the eyewitness accounts of the Gospels.
But there are eyewitness accounts in every biblical text.
I would really say, well, we need
Mackie,
to examine that.
you're the historical expert here.
Yeah.
Okay, so like I said, there was no eyewitness accounts written down. They were all word of mouth until the year 70.
But they were written by eyewitnesses, perhaps 30 years after the fact, but they were eyewitnesses.
It's totally interesting. There's almost Paul was born a year or so after Jesus was born, or not?
How do you know that? Where are you getting that from?
That's. Do you want me to get my sources? I'm sorry. I'll get.
No, I think
I
what
can
we're
bring you
saying is,
sources,
like,
but
how
I
do we
can't
know which
provide them
sources to
now.
trust? Why do we not trust the gospel sources, and why do we trust other sources?
Because
They're biased.
how do we know the other sources aren't
Especially
biased?
ones that have been tested and tried. This book and this Bible has been thoroughly examined and tried under scrutiny.
456 contradictions in the Bible. Genesis 1
Please
and
tell me
Genesis
them one.
Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are
See, this is where we go back to. We've already had this
instantly
discussion.
contradict each other. Okay.
Yeah, so-
I want to kill this right here because
Yeah.
I don't want to get into a discussion of biblical validity.
I'd really like
Because
to
we've-
bring another subject to the table if we could. And it has to do with something that we've all been assuming from the very outset, and that's rationality to begin with. The philosophers have known for hundreds of years that it's very difficult to get rationality off the ground. And let me explain that. From the very, very inception of science got started in Western culture because there was this intrinsic understanding that the universe is rational and intelligible, and had laws in which it conformed to, because there was a rational, intelligible God, law-giving God, that created it. Okay? So we can expect, as rational human beings that have been created by God, to be able to understand, use our faculties of reason, which correspond with the rational universe out there. When God is removed from the picture, we have no basis for reason. We have no basis to trust our five
completely
senses.
incorrect because the basis of science is not on. Science is not based on reason. I guess. What did you call it? Reason.
Well, reason. Yeah.
Rationality. Not based on the existence of a law-giving God. Science, very specifically, is just observing trends.
But you have to assume.
No, you have to assume
rationality from the
No,
outset.
you don't.
You have to assume it.
No,
a
you
priori.
don't.
You do.
Because
How else do you know?
because we base any scientific law or theory or whatever you want to call it is based on observation and nothing more.
Which is rationality.
You have to assume it before. How can you show me?
Define rationality.
You answer me. Let's try to figure this one out. How do we know that we can trust our five senses if we got here through an impersonal force of evolution? There's nothing that tells me that my faculties of reason can tell me anything about the objective universe. The only thing, according to the theory, that I am good for and I can know, the only reason I exist is to propagate my species. I might not possess the faculties to engage with reality. I can't say that. I have no basis for saying that. It might be the case, and we might find that there's a correspondence but what happens in my mind through my imagination, which goes on in the universe, but I have no basis for it. And I would say that would give us hints that, wait a second, why do hundreds and thousands of years ago, mathematicians were coming up with complex mathematical models that did not correspond with reality. It's not until present day we find, wow, these have real world applications. Why do the imaginations out of mathematical minds correspond with physical realities that are happening that we're discovering thousands of years ago?
Because this is the thing. Again, you're talking about, like, you know, these mathematical equations that explain observable phenomenon. That doesn't require God. You're seeing God as a necessity in rationale.
What I'm saying is there's no basis for rationality. There's no reason. We might discover after the fact, but we have to assume reason to begin with.
Well, the point of science isn't just to observe the facts and come up with laws on that. The point of science is to come up with predictable things that happen. We assess our surroundings. We come up with laws that happen every single time. No God fits in there, and then
science got off the ground because they expected a law-giving God to make a law-conforming universe.
No,
that's
no,
That's not
that's
true.
completely not true. God is not necessary.
You go
God
back
is
to guys
not
like Kepler, who and that's what I'm saying. They expected it.
They expected
because it was part of their worldview.
No, they did not expect it because of God. They expected it because it happened every single time. You don't need you're looking for something that's not there. You don't need it to be there. These laws exist because that is the physics of the universe. You can argue that God is the person who started the ball rolling and made these laws. If you do that, then fine. But again, that's not. Again, yeah, you're not Christian, and that's not even provable or disprovable. And it's not evidence for God, because if it can happen without God, then there's no reason for us to believe that it happened because of God. Regardless of the history of science, while it's true that many scientists were religious people, like Mendel was a monk, father of genetics, and Galileo, Newton, yeah. Well, a lot of scientists.
Socially, though, it's
yeah,
the social environment that you're brought up in.
It's the social environment. But
what I'm saying is, it shaped their entire view on reality as well. It wasn't just something they did on Sunday, right? Like it affects your entire worldview.
But the thing is, you're seeing God as a necessity for science, and it's not. And it's not it's not the basis of rationality. The basis of rationality is the repetition in what we see.
So also the
I would encourage you to read someone like David Hume that shows there is no basis for rationality. Rationality cannot get off the ground. It has to be assumed. There is an article of faith in absolutely everything, including science.
Yes, the article of faith in science is that things happen. Things happen according to natural phenomenon. And the mantra of science is always find the mechanism. What's the mechanism? How does this happen? And again, you're talking about David Hume, this is a philosopher. And as much as philosophy definitely comes into the God debate, if you're talking about science, you can't throw philosophy in there because it doesn't stand up.
But we already said that we're left to go to philosophy because we already said
you can requiring from his logical arguments all along. I'm only going where you led me.
Because we already said empirical evidence. There's no empirical evidence to prove or disprove God. So now we're at the philosophical.
Right, but now you're attacking rationality, which is not based in God.
No, we're not attacking it. We're actually saying, why does it exist in the first place? It exists because there isn't a reasonable God.
But you haven't defined rationality, so if you'd like to do that, that'd be good.
Excuse me, Rob, would you mind if I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm scared. So you said that for rationality and for observable phenomena to be present, God must be present as well, kind of? Is that right?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is a Christian worldview. I want to stay within Christianity. Within a Christian worldview, there is a basis for rationality. You can expect there to be a rational, intelligible universe out there because you have a rational and intelligible God that created it. And what I'm saying is, coming at it from an atheistic perspective, you have no basis to make that claim. It's made entirely by faith, and it has to be, right? You have to work from within your paradigm. You cannot prove your first principles, or else your first principles wouldn't be your first principles anymore. So one of the assumptions of science is there's a rational, intelligible universe out there, and we can approach it and understand it. Now, evidence comes after the fact. I'm not saying that, but there is no basis for that belief. Whereas within the Christian worldview, there is a basis. You know what I mean? I expect there to be a rational, intelligent universe. Why? Because God exists, right? That's what I'm saying.
However, if God didn't exist, then irrational behavior would ensue. Like 5 times out of 10, if I dropped the water bottle, it would float upwards. Like irrational behavior like that.
No, what I'm saying is we are assuming reason all along. We have no idea if we can trust our 5 senses, like I said earlier. We have no idea. According to science, we do not know. Okay, we know today, like I'll drop my cup and it falls, that the laws of gravity hold, right? We cannot say that is going to... Everything could completely change tomorrow. There's no reason for us necessarily to believe. We actually hold by faith that the laws of physics are going to hold till tomorrow because we have no way to actually demonstrate or prove that it'll be otherwise.
Okay, you're invoking the anthropic principle that there needs to be an intelligent designer for intelligence. For information to exist, you need to have an information giver. It's considered the anthropic principle. It's very metaphysical. It is philosophical
I have
nature.
a crude understanding of the principle.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, see, the thing is that you now have you can keep going back. Where does God get his intelligence? And and postulating that he only has, or that he's always existed doesn't work, because that's just moving the goalposts back. You're bringing it back from, rather than the universe.
You should let them answer one at a time.
Okay, where the universe just has an intrinsic quality about it that it is predictable.
Yeah,
and rather than that,
you present what's called an infinite regression is what yeah.
Which we talked about last week.
Yeah, which we did talk about last week, so we're not going to talk about it again. Go ahead.
I just want to bring up that theories is what science is based on. Laws are just the mathematical model to theories.
Right.
All right. Laws do not come from a God; they come from math that seems to model what happens. Mm-hmm. The theory, you can argue, comes from God. That the reason comes from God, but the theory itself is something that people thought of. That They saw this, and they say, I think that this will happen every time. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, and like part of the, I guess, what Mackie Drew was saying about the anthropic principle. So you're excluding the possibility, I guess. Like you're saying that rationale is based on a law-giving God to make that rationale constant. You're excluding the possibility that the universe is constant intrinsically. The laws of the universe are the intrinsic quality of them.
And can I just
do you want to say something?
Just a couple of quick. It's also false dichotomy. You're noting that it's either this or Christianity, where you could also have a psychopantheistic view where you believe that it's the belief that everything automatically has a shred of consciousness in it, which is another equally as rational view as a theistic approach.
Yeah, and you guys haven't defined. I asked this 10 minutes ago. You guys haven't defined rationality, so we can't really have a good discussion about it.
Why don't you define it for us?
Well, you got rationality is. To me, rationality is completely subjective. It's more of a social construct, as I keep saying. Rationality is the reason why something happens, why you do something. That would be your rationale. Why I should have said why something happens is not rationality. Why you do something would be rationality. Sorry. Who? You're a new guest. Well, would you like to
my name is Kaluf. I'm a friend of Mackie.
All right, cool.
I would say that something that is rational is something that can be understood in the real sense, that you see it happen, therefore it is rational. Something that is irrational is something that you could not see happen in the real sense. For example, irrational numbers you cannot see in the real world just because they are irrational, but they still have a tie-in to the real world.
And you made a point, Rod, about not being able to trust our senses as, adequate ways of measuring our universe, right?
Just to clarify.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we shouldn't trust our senses.
Right.
Okay. I'm saying we have no logical basis to trust our senses. We trust.
Yeah.
We trust by faith that they actually can tell us something. about the external.
But having,
Right,
but
because
having, sorry.
that's the only thing we have, and that's not a false dichotomy. Like, without it, we have nothing else.
Right.
And I would say the same thing to your belief in God. It's like you don't know that what you're feeling is God. Like, you can't be sure that it's not just a hallucination of your mind. I can't be sure that I'm even in this room.
Exactly.
You know, like if you
But
want,
you are.
No, well, I can't.
You can't
You
confirm
can't
that.
prove it, but you are.
We all presume he is.
See, that's a really important part. You know, we can't prove that you're in this room. It's like we can't prove that I'm in this room or I'm talking right now. But does that mean that you don't exist?
It depends. It depends on what you're
saying you
taking
don't
as
exist?
proof. I'm saying that if you accept the five senses or any observational empirical evidence as proof, then yes, I do exist. But if you cut those out, then there's no proof of my existence. There's no proof of this room's existence.
And having quote unquote faith in our senses has nothing to do with the existence of God.
No,
Right?
but
Having the quality of faith in something has nothing to do with the existence of God.
I think what he's trying to say is that there's just as much faith for us to say, hey, based on these senses, based on these things which I perceive to be rational, based on these things that without which I will have nothing, we do see God. And for you, if we take away, your senses, that which you perceive the world with, you have nothing as well.
Yeah, well, that's not true, right? Because we...
No, but that's exactly what he's saying.
It depends. Yeah, that's what I guess. But that's not true, though, right? You guys, I have a feeling which we can explain psychologically and even biologically why this is happening. We can explain it. I'm having this experience. We put the little. Okay, the phone's ringing. We put the patches on your head, and then we do all those kind of stuff. We measure your brain activity. Just. Awesome. If you're listening, whoever phoned in, too bad. So. You have anecdotal evidence. We have mathematical formulas. We have...
Hang on. Where's the mathematical formula that says you can trust your senses? You're starting from a basis of faith. Your faith...
Yeah, that person really wants to...
Okay, hang on.
Never mind.
You are starting from a basis of faith that says that I believe that I can justify that my senses are truly what is true.
You just ran over my foot, Keegan. Well, okay. So, like I said, having faith in any one thing or any quality or any, I have faith in science, blah blah blah. That's just semantics, first of all, and having the quality of, because people say, well, faith is a religious word, but it doesn't necessarily have to.
No, faith isn't religious.
But it goes either way, right? And of course, we can't fully trust our senses, but we have. What you guys have is a physiological experience. What we have is we have a computer sitting here and monitoring things. We have all these scientific tools. You have no tools to justify your claims other than anecdotal evidence. We have.
Yeah, and I think what Kevin's saying is true. We have that intrinsic faith in what our senses tell us is what we have to go on. And we've moved on from basing it not on what we see necessarily, but what we can observe through other tools that we develop. And again, one of the, I guess, hallmarks of science is its forward progress based on the fact that, someone said, oh, maybe there's something more than what our human eyes are seeing. So we'll develop something that can see in the infrared spectrum and the ultraviolet spectrum. And we have that forward motion. So we're always trying to be more consistent and we're trying to find proof of our methods of observation, I guess.
But you're starting from ground rules. You're starting from the assumption and the faith that what you see, that what you deduct, that what your mind is doing is actually logical, is actually reasonable, is actually making sense. But that is a position of faith, that you are starting from a position saying that what I'm doing up here in my brain actually makes sense. How do you know? I mean, that's faith that you have. You can't prove to me mathematically that that what you do in science is making sense. Like, you can prove to me from
we don't claim
science
to say that it makes. We say, yeah. This
so
is
there
what
you go.
happens,
You're starting
right?
from faith.
But what happens is you start from faith as well, and
I
then
know
you
we
have this
do.
extra faith added on, right?
but what I've
We're
added
saying,
in-
yeah, of course, nobody can be 100% sure of any one thing, but that has nothing to do with the argument.
The chief point that I wanted to make, and I'm glad it seems like now we're actually grappling with it, is that the Christian actually, he doesn't have to put faith in that he can trust his reason. His reason is already valid on the basis that God exists. A Christian can trust his reason. Now, the article of faith is trusting that God exists and God is who he says he is. And then we actually employ our reason. Because remember, we talked about this last week. God comes into human time, space, history and actually encourages us to employ our reason. Am I or am I not God? And I'll demonstrate it through my life, death, and resurrection, right? So that's what I'm trying to get at, is the Christian has a basis for reason.
Right, but
and God actually has given us it for a purpose, that we may know him, that we may relate to him, that God is a comprehensible God in a limited sense, but we can know God. That's what we were created to do. So that was my chief point, is that we have to start from assumptions.
Right, yeah.
We have to, and we agree on that, and I'm glad that we do.
It's impossible to not.
But the Christian actually has a basis for reason.
Yeah, but your basis is the Bible, which, as I know Mackie didn't quite say, but is irrational to begin with. It has so many contradictions.
Well, we would need to.
I don't want to start. I don't want to
investigate
start the
that
Bible.
further.
I don't want to start the Bible debate.
We'll do that in our private time.
But the thing is, true, we're making an assumption just like you. And again, I would make the claim that, the assumption that God exists and is the voice of reason is no more valid than us having faith in our senses. There's nothing that puts your belief in God as more logical than our belief in our senses.
I would disagree, because if you're an atheist, if you're going to be a consistent atheist, you're forced to question your senses. You're forced to question.
Absolutely.
Whereas I'm not forced to question. I can trust that. No, I can trust my senses. Now, there are going to be times, let's say I decide to smoke a joint later on and I'm seeing all kinds of crazy things. I can doubt my senses, but if I am a normal functioning human being, I have a basis for trusting my senses. Now, logically, and I'm not saying experientially that all of us should walk around not trusting, but what I'm saying is there is a basis if a rational, intelligible God exists.
There's also a base, like again, I don't want to just go back to the same argument, but you haven't even touched on my point of why belief in God gives you more credence than belief in the senses. Like, there's no logical reason.
Because we don't have to doubt reason.
Because reason exists, and therefore there's a reasonable, and then we can just go back and say, because reason exists, and the Bible once again has an answer for that, along with how to explain the problems of this world, how to explain religion, how to deal with, relationally, all sorts of things. I guess I would like to ask this question: why do you not believe that God exists?
I haven't been given any evidence. One note:
That's exactly
what
Russell said.
there's a difference, or what's the difference rather than a man who believes there's a leprechaun on his shoulder, flaming and telling him to kill furniture between I don't.
It gets silly.
That was on the spot, and I don't. You know what? Christianity is just as silly as that, and I can prove that in 10 easy steps, but later on.
It's more like a bunch of.
I can lose weight in 10 easy
But what's
It's more
the?
like a bunch of little people thinking that. It's not just one person. It's like a bunch of people just reinforcing their ideas that they should burn furniture.
It's not a straw. I was getting to the position. It's not a straw man.
Here's the thing: we are totally rejecting the historical, scholarly evidence surrounding the New Testament, and I think that you're just glossing over that and going past that way too easily. I would really recommend spend some time and look at the work. Okay, because you're just bypassing it like it's nothing. It's not nothing.
No. We can't get into this.
Well,
we can't get into it.
Not here, but later.
Yeah,
but it's not fair, to be honest, when he says things like, I could destroy Christianity in 10 easy steps. Well, you know what? Well, you could dismiss it. I want to quote you right, so make sure I do quote you right. But
I said that I can prove it's ridiculous in 10 easy
prove
steps.
it's ridiculous. Okay, but you guys you've come back often to, does the Bible exist? Look at the problems with this. The dating's all wrong. But I'm sure you accept that Aristotle existed. Do you believe that Aristotle existed?
Yes.
Did you know that there's less evidence, historical manuscripts for his writing than there is for the New Testament?
I haven't done enough research to make a claim on that.
I would encourage you to look at that.
Way after the fact, like 500 years compared to,
like
you said yourself, 30, 40, 60 years, 70. Which the gospel accounts. Well, that is very, very liberal history.
Actually, that's the lowest estimate.
Well, we're reading different books then. And I'm trying to be fair in looking at looking at the scholars that do cover the spectrum of conservative to liberal. So that is certainly not the low end. I'm not saying that some scholars wouldn't say that, but from 40 to the latest, they say the Gospel of John, they say like 90 AD. So we are obviously reading from different sources.
Anyway, again, I don't want to do the Bible discussion.
Sorry for keeping bringing this up.
Because we hit these he said, she said arguments, and there's nowhere we can go with this discussion, right? So we have to keep it in stuff that we can logically work through, and
that's why I brought up the argument.
Yeah, no, and I'm still sort of grappling with that argument in my mind, because I still don't see, you're saying that your rationale is based on God, therefore you can trust that it's rational. What's the difference between that and us saying we believe that the universe follows rational laws? It's almost like we're saying the same thing, and you're just saying God made those laws.
It might be the case that the universe does follow these physical laws, and we don't deny that. But where the assumption lies, where the faith lies, is that I actually possess the faculties to engage it. That's what I'm saying.
I think our universe is what we observe. That is, like, by definition, what we can observe is the universe that we live in. And so, yes, I would say that our five senses are, by definition, the adequate tools, or like our rationale are the adequate tools to observe the universe that we live in. Whether there's something beyond that, we don't make any claims on, because we have no evidence for it.
And there's your faith claim.
What's that?
Your faith claim is, you said, I believe that our five senses are enough to observe the universe that we live in.
No, I said by definition, our five senses are
so by definition
trustworthy to.
And there's your faith claim. And I'm not trying to say,
but it's not a faith claim, because it's by definition. It's not like I'm saying I believe this. It's a necessity. It must be
in order for your worldview to hold water.
No, in order for it's the logical progression.
Yeah, but I think what I'm trying to say is that you ultimately, and this is what Rod was saying, what John was saying, ultimately, like, you take it back all the way back, and every one of us starts with some sort of faith claim. You believe that your senses are enough. You believe that what you see with your senses actually corresponds to reality. And that is something that cannot be proven, that cannot be scientifically shown. That is what you believe. We believe in God, that He is the basis of that, and that He has given us these faculties. We are all starting from a faith claim. And your faith goes to science. Our faith goes to science, to God, to everything. We encompass that. But I think we need to remember that we all start with a bias, a faith claim, a worldview, whatever you want to call it. We all start with something there, and that influences everything we see. That, everything that we see is seen through the lens of that basis, that worldview that we hold. So I think that we need to remember that.
Yeah, I just wanted to
Classic Kevin argument.
Yeah, that's a classic Kevin argument. We actually have to wrap it up because we have 15 seconds. I was going to say something, but I don't want to start anything. So I guess we're going to try to continue the symposium throughout the summer, starting in July. Hope that everyone wants to listen. Is going to listen in.
Yep. So I'd like to thank everyone for being here. If you're around in the summer, you're absolutely free to come join us. We'll send out an email or whatever. And thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next year at the latest. You're listening to theriotradio.com. This is Symposium. See you next year.